Hi, I'm Tom Henson, and welcome to the inaugural installment of Tom's Take. This is going to be what I call a Sunday morning eye-opening cup of coffee. It's going to be a little bit different than For the Record was. You might remember For the Record, the audio program I used to do in this space. This is going to be a video component. It's going to have a video component that is going to do a couple things. One, it's going to make sure that I don't look like a slob, like I sometimes do when I'm sitting in here. Say if I maybe get in a little bit late on a weekday morning. But the good news is I don't know how to edit video very well. And that's good because my problem with For the Record was that, it was a 10-minute program, just like this, roughly. But each week it took about 3 hours for me to put together a 10-minute program. And part of that was because I was a perfectionist when it came to the audio. I had to have the song match the words and have it all hit just right. And I was putting way too much value on that and not as much value on the information. I was putting too much on the packaging and not on the contents. There. So I'm not going to be able to make many edits to this. So you're going to hear everything warts and all. Pauses, stumbles, stuttering. So it's going to be more like recording it off the air during an exchange that Rod and I might have or when I'm talking than it will be a big production. So even though there's video, it's pretty much going to be warts and all until I can figure out how to edit video better. So, welcome. This is the studio where I do the morning news with Rod Thorson. You can't see, but he's in the control room directly ahead of me, and he sits like this because this is how the console is set up. And he turns and looks at me like this, and he raises his hand when it's time, when he'd like me to talk and join in, and turns back when he's done having me join in. And we have a good, rhythm that works that way because we can see each other very well. And I have my own space in here where I can do work. It used to be that we were together in the same room, and COVID hit, and we got separate studios. So, welcome. What you're going to hear today is, first, a thank you, a heartfelt, sincere thank you to my friend and sponsor Kathleen Whalen of Whalen Financial Group in LaSalle. She sponsored For the Record all that time, most of that time, and she's agreed to sponsor this. Thank you, Kathleen. Appreciate that. So stop in and see Kathleen Whalen at Whalen Financial Group on First Street in LaSalle, please. What I did for all those years between when I left this station in 94 and coming back in 2018 was pretty much working in strategic communications. If you listen to Rod's morning show, the WLPO morning show, you know that I worked in L.A. for a lot of that time, Orange County, Los Angeles, and I did professional communications for organizations, for candidates, for issues, for agencies. And so that, I think, gives me some license to share some thoughts about three tremendous crises this area is experiencing in just the first quarter of the year. The Karis explosion, the CL Enterprises saga, probably most importantly, though, the hospital closure. It's going to have the most impact across the area. All of these things were hampered. All of these things were made worse by the fact that there didn't appear to be a decent communication plan in place. They seemed to be winging it. People said that they were surprised by it. The closing especially, it blindsided them. Now, John Small has a public service announcement that's running on the air this time of year, and it says pretty much, essentially, when a tornado's coming, that's not the time to plan for a tornado. You're in crisis mode, and you don't think about external communications. You just don't, often. You're thinking about resuming business. You're thinking about making sure that you keep damages as low as possible, that you get back to operating as quickly as possible. But think about all the constituents who need you or who are using you and who are feeling betrayed right now. Karis, CL Enterprises, St. Margaret's Health, because you didn't have a plan in place. And if you did, you didn't execute it. Or it was a terrible plan that you executed. Can you imagine not having a plan in place if you work for a defense company? Hurricane Katrina came through in the days before social media in 2005. And I was in Los Angeles, but we had a ship building business that had 20,000 employees or so in the Gulf area, New Orleans and Mississippi. When Katrina hit, they dispersed. They had to save their lives. They had to leave. We didn't have a plan for that particular instance. We got things going pretty well afterward. But see, the way we were decentralized, the shipyards did most of the communication for their businesses, and we didn't at the corporate office in Los Angeles. But what do you do when the communicators in the zone have to evacuate and we can't find them? This is before everybody had a cell phone. It's before social media existed. So we invented it as we went, and brother, let me tell you, you don't want to do that. You want to be ready to go. Lesson learned. A few years later, I worked in the aircraft division, was probably the easiest thing to call it, at Northrop Grumman in El Segundo, California. El Segundo adjacent pretty much to LAX airport. And so we would go through these scenarios, crisis scenarios, where we would get a text or an alarm on our phones in the middle of the night that say a scenario that something's happening. It was a scenario. It wasn't really happening, but it was to get us ready for if it did. So in the case of El Segundo, we might go through an exercise of a plane missing the runway at LAX and hitting our building. Something like that. Or a gunman, which is all too familiar, on the property. What do we do about that? So we would have global supply chain, operations, security, quality, the aircraft folks, and communications, each with a binder in a dedicated room that we would retreat to and pull out the binder. We were responsible for our own sections of the binder that had to do with communication around any incident. And we had it down cold. Now, thank God, nothing ever happened where we had to pull it out off the shelf. But you don't want to pull off your communications plan off the shelf. You want to have it be an ongoing evergreen document. Living. It can make the difference between not just, informing your stakeholders and building that trust or not diminishing the trust that you have with them. It can also affect your business. What if we have to reach out to lawmakers who control the budgets for Northrop Grumman? We need to reach lawmakers. So we did all this. We went through every scenario we could think of within reason and had a roadmap in place. And we kept it fresh, and we rehearsed quite a bit compared to what I had been used to. I didn't see that, or at least evidence of that level of preparation with the Karis explosion. Now, again, they responded in a way that was good for their business, I assume, but it completely destroyed credibility and goodwill, especially in the neighborhood around the plant. It doesn't get any better when community members come to city council meetings and can't get any answers either. Karis avoids those. So it's frustrating for people. Their lives are disrupted by this. Can you imagine anything more disruptive than losing a hospital, especially if there's going to be no OB care? Where was the communication plan around that? That one was a surprise. Why didn't they communicate it to employees? Why were employees texting us about a closure at St. Margaret's in Peru before they had even been informed? Because they heard. And communication is instant. CL Enterprises, I think, gave up communicating, at least with LaSalle, their hometown, Peru, long ago. They were supposed to have the Maytag building complete by the fall of 2019. And when it wasn't, a few months later, when COVID hit, we went back to CL and asked them why it wasn't done. The answer we got essentially was, well, COVID got in the way. Baloney. No way. They lied to the press. They lied to us. Because the building was supposed to be done before anybody had ever heard of COVID here. Any excuse they can find. Had they had a communication plan, I can't say that would have changed their approach to communicating, but at least they would have shown that they were giving thought to how to communicate. If you don't have good communication in the worst of times, how do you expect to have goodwill or build it in the best of times? You don't want to plan for a tornado when it's heading for you. So what do we do? This isn't a bitch session. This is meant to share what I have learned. And I would recommend at this point, seriously, that these companies invest right now in time and money, whatever they have to do, to get a decent communication plan in place, like pronto. You can get it at IABC, International Association of Business Communicators. You can get it at maybe PRSA, Public Relations Society of America. And not a plan, but at least advice on building it. I'd be glad to offer thoughts, too, from a media perspective if you just want to call unofficially and see what I think based on my background. I'm happy to help. We're all in this together in this community. We need to remember that. All right, watch for this video online. You can listen to it on a Sunday morning. We'll go from there. Thanks for joining me for this first installment of Tom's Take. Take care. Have a good week.